Alright, what is up, guys? And we are back, and so we're going to be talking about the next chapter, which goes on to greetings. So I'm going to teach you guys some of the greetings here, and I'll actually be talking about some other greetings as well that are used in everyday conversation. So first, I'm going to show you guys the greetings that are taught in the grammar textbook, Genki. First one here is Ohayo, Ohayo, Ohayo. Okay, so this means good morning, and as you can see, there's a picture here. She's saying good morning to his mother. Ohayo is kind of like an informal or casual way, like if you're talking to your family or if you're talking to your friends, you would use Ohayo as as the greeting for good morning. But so here it says Ohayo gozaimasu, which means the same thing. It means good morning, but the only difference is that Ohayo gozaimasu means good morning to it's a formal way of saying good morning. As you can see, the student is greeting her teacher and saying good morning in a formal way. So that is a situation that you would use the formal. Usually you would use the more formal, maybe to an elder or maybe to a superior, you would say, or maybe to a coworker at work, Ohayo gozaimasu, or just a more formal way and polite way of saying good morning. Next we have this one here, which is a konnichiwa. Konnichiwa, which means good afternoon or hello, and I'm sure you guys have heard this before. It is used to say maybe past 11 o'clock. You would just say, "Oh, konnichiwa," hello, good afternoon, and that is the way that you would say konnichiwa. And it is pretty polite. It is pretty formal as well. And here we have konbanwa, konbanwa, which means good evening, and that is depicted here by the picture. You can tell that it is nighttime, and he is saying konbanwa. And this one is actually also kind of a bit formal, so it would be a good greeting to use. You just the way that you would say it in normal conversation would be like, "Oh, konbanwa, konbanwa," and kind of like it's like a little bow. It's konbanwa, konbanwa. Something like it's just seems it's more polite. It's like a polite way of saying it. Next is sayonara, sayonara, sayonara. The thing is with this one, I would say it means goodbye or farewell, but it is not actually used as often as you would think. Sayonara is kind of like a heavy, more like it's more used like if you're never gonna see them again, or it kind of gives that like very heavy meaning, like, oh, like I'm not gonna see you for like a really long time, or like I might not see you ever again. Like even with like breakups and stuff like that, you would sometimes you would say sayonara as like, I'll never, as like a breakup line. But sayonara is not really used as often. There's other ways to say bye, like to a friend. Like you would say like ja ne, or ja mata. It's kind of like a way of saying like, oh, bye. Like ja means like well, and then mata means like again. So kind of like see you later. Like, oh, see you later, ja mata, or mata ne. But matane, I think, is more used for women. I would say women would mostly say matane. That is just a feeling that I get. Like when I speak to guys and stuff, they would say like jane, mata, or just be like mata, mata, or bye bye. That's another one you could say too. Bye bye. But sayonara is actually used in schools as well. With student to the teacher, that's what they teach the students to say to the teachers when they are leaving. They say, sayonara. And other than that, it wouldn't be used as often. But that is something that they do teach their kid, like their students, their kids, to say to their teachers. But other than that, it's not really used in everyday conversations. Okay, guys. Now we're moving on to the next one. Maybe you can look at this picture and you can see, maybe take a guess of what it means. Basically, he's saying good night. So to say good night is oyasumi nasai. Oyasumi nasai. So oyasumi nasai is kind of like more formal way of saying good night. But you could also say oyasumi. Oyasumi. And without the nasai, oyasumi is more of a casual way of saying good night. And I would say that this is more common. You would say oyasumi, oyasumi nasai. I would say that oyasumi is used more commonly because, you're mostly saying that to someone that you're living with, like your spouse or your mother, your family members. You would just say, oh, oyasumi, kind of like good night. Okay? And now we're moving to the next one, and I'm sure you guys all know this one, but it's arigato. Arigato, which means thank you. And you can tell arigato, and then the to, and there's a u at the end, which kind of elongates the sound. Arigato. Arigato. Thank you, thank you. That's what it means. Thank you. And you can tell by this picture he's holding her stuff and she's saying thank you. So, arigato. And the thing is, this is more like a casual way of saying thank you. And you maybe would say it with like friends or family. But if you did want to say it a little bit more politely, you would say arigato gozaimasu. Arigato gozaimasu means thank you very much. So you can tell that there's a difference between thank you and thank you very much. There's more. It's more of an expression of gratitude, right? Arigato gozaimasu. Arigato gozaimasu is very polite, and I think it is a great way to express gratitude when you use arigato gozaimasu. I would say, yeah, definitely with people that you're not really familiar with, maybe using arigato gozaimasu might be the better way to show politeness and to show gratitude. Okay, now let's move to the next one here, which is sumimasen. Sumimasen. Sumimasen, which means excuse me. So as you can see here, she accidentally chipped on his foot there, and she said, "Oh, sumimasen." Kind of the is kind of like a reaction, like, "Oh, sumimasen, oh, sumimasen." And then he says, "Iie," and "iie" is no. It means no, but it means like, "Oh, no worries," or "No problem," or "It's okay." It's like, "Oh, no, 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 it's okay," "Iie." Yeah, and it's a elongated, right? It's not ie, it's e. It's a long e sound. So in this situation, she tripped on him and she said sumimasen, but he said ie. It's okay, no worries, it's fine. So moving on here, so in Japanese tradition, whenever people are leaving the house, like if you're leaving your house, you would say like, "Oh, I'm leaving," and then they'd be like, "Oh, okay, see you later." So that right here is what it represents. I know that we may not say this all the time in English. Sometimes we just kind of leave the house, and just when we go. um, but it is a tradition that they do. So I'm going to teach you guys what this is right here. So it means, so you would say, "Ittekimasu." Ittekimasu. As you can tell that there is a small tsu right here, which means that there will be a pause in between i and te. So i, てきます。行ってきます。行ってきます。Okay? Which basically means that I will go, but I'll be back. So it's like I'm going now, so I'll be back. And then this right here would be いってらっしゃい。いってらっしゃい. This one has two small tsus here. So いって and らっしゃい. いってらっしゃい is how you would say this phrase here. Yeah, it basically just means like, oh, okay, see you later. Like, いってらっしゃい. And so, 行ってきます, 行ってらっしゃい is like a very, very, very common thing. Common, like, two phrases that you would say. I say it today with my Japanese wife. Whenever I'm leaving to work, I just say, oh, 行ってきます. And she just says, oh, 行ってらっしゃい. It's just something that they always say. Here, moving on here, this is actually the same thing. So there's a tradition when you come home, you would kind of say like, oh, I'm home, and they would be like, oh, welcome home. It's just something that they say every time. So to say this, you would say, when you come home, you would say tadaima, tadaima, which is kind of like, oh, I'm here. And then whoever's at home would say okaeri nasai. And okaeri nasai is kind of a more formal way. As you guys can tell, like this is nasai is the same as oyasumi nasai, and you can tell that nasai is more of a formal way of saying it. And my mom always used to say okaeri nasai whenever I came home. But it's actually okay to also say like okaeri, and that's something that I say every day whenever people come home or whenever my wife comes home. I'll say oh okaeri, and she would say tadaima. And it can go in either order. It doesn't have to be like oh tadaima okaeri. It could be okaeri tadaima kind of thing. It can go both ways. But these two phrases here go together. Okaeri or tadaima. Okaeri nasai is also like a formal way of saying it, so you could say it that way as well. And then other traditions here. So this is actually, if you guys have ever heard this one, is before you eat. It kind of means like, oh, I will partake of this food, and it's kind of showing gratefulness to the person that prepared the food for you. If you have someone that has made the food for you, and then you would kind of say, oh, okay, I will partake of this food. Thank you for this food. It's kind of like giving thanks, I guess, in a way. So you would say, itadakimasu, itadakimasu, which means I will partake, I will receive this food. And it is used very, very commonly before you start eating to represent that you are thankful and grateful for the food that has been prepared for you. Okay? And so what this is before you eat, it's called itadakimasu, is how you say it, itadakimasu. And I had to say it when I was young. It was just something that I learned, and it's definitely tradition in Japan to do this, to say this. And then when you're done, you would say gochisousama, 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 which means thank you for the food. It's kind of just also giving thanks after you finish it, which is basically saying thank you for the food. So this is another way to show gratitude to whoever made it. You would say gochisousama, or you would also say gochisousama deshita, which is a more polite way of saying gochisousama. So gochisousama deshita, and I'll add that in here for you guys to see it, but it's gochisousama deshita is a more formal way of saying thank you for this food. Okay, now this one here is basically like if you're doing like an introduction in front of people, you would say like, oh, nice to meet you, my name is whatever, my name is Aaron. And so let me just go over this one here. Hajimemashite. Hajimemashite. How you would actually say this, the she is kind of like silenced you would just say hajimemashite, which basically means, oh, okay, nice to meet you. It's the first time I'm meeting this person. You would not say hajimemashite to a person that you've already met. It was just very weird. So you would say it to someone that you have never met before and you're meeting them for the first time, and you would say, oh, hajimemashite, which means nice to meet you. Dozo yoroshiku. Dozo yoroshiku means like, oh, please treat me well, which is, it's kind of weird to say that in English, but it's just very common to say that in Japan, like, oh, please treat me well, or yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Basically it just means, yeah, please welcome me. It's kind of like, please welcome me, and please treat me well, things like that, so I know it sounds weird in English, like English, we don't really say like, oh, please treat me well, or we just say like, oh, hey, nice to meet you, right on. So this is just something that they do when they are introducing themselves, or whenever you're meeting someone new, you could say this. はじめまして、どうぞよろしく。私の名前はアーロンです. Or something like that. You would say, my name is Aaron. Nice to meet you. Things like that. Okay. And then this right here pretty much goes over everything that we just talked about. These were the pictures that were talked about here, and every single one I went over with you guys, so I'm not going to go over this. Oh, right. So these right here was actually, so when I said sayonara, there's like several goodbye expressions, right? But I did say that sayonara is not really used as commonly as these other ones. Ja mata, which means, between friends, I'll see you again, see you later. And shitsure, so this one right here is called shitsure shimasu. Shitsure shimasu, which means it's a more formal way. It's saying shitsure means rude. Shimasu means like you're being rude. So it's like, oh, excuse me, I'm being rude. Or it's kind of just like a way when you say like goodbye to a superior or to someone, you want to say it formally. Shitsure shimasu. Like, let's say, for example, like you're talking to your teacher, you went into your teacher's office, or when you're knocking on the door to your teacher's office and you open the door, so you would say, oh, shitsure shimasu. And you're letting them know, like, oh, okay, I'm being rude, I'm kind of just going in here, but I'm letting you know that I am being rude, and please forgive me and stuff. Basically, it's kind of like that kind of vibe, I guess. And then when you're leaving, you would say, oh, shitsure shimasu, and you would be leaving, and saying, oh, I'm being rude for leaving. It's just a very formal way of saying, I'm saying bye and like I'm leaving. It's just something that they say um, quite often, especially in formal situations, like exactly like right here, taking leave from a professor's office, right? And then ittekimasu is like saying bye, but you're leaving your house. It's like, okay, I'll be back. It's like I'm leaving, but I'll be back. Bye. Kind of like that. It's kind of like I guess that's the way of saying bye as well. Now, and then sumimasen, we went over that. It means excuse me. Iie, iie means no. Itterashai, ittekimasu, tadaima o kaeri nasai. So those are the things that we went over when you say like, oh, I'm leaving and coming back. And I explained that with you guys. Okay, so I did want to go over this with you guys. This is the practice. It's basically a scenario where we're gonna act this out. So I'm gonna give you guys how we're gonna act this out. Basically, I'm gonna go over each situation and what you guys would say in these situations. So let's start from number one. You meet your family. You meet your host family for the first time, and you greet them. So how are you going to greet them? So first thing what I would do, I would say, oh, hajimemashite, hajimemashite, which means nice to meet you, hajimemashite, and then I would say my name. I would say my name, Aaron desu. So hajimemashite, Aaron desu, and then that would be the way to greet them. Dozo yoroshiku, yoroshiku onegai shimasu is like the first phrases that you would say to your host family. If you can say this to someone that you're meeting for the first time, even if you can't speak that much, I think it goes a long way because you're starting off the relationship with on a good note by saying "hajimemashite," Aaron desu, or whatever your name is. You say "dozo yoroshiku onegai shimasu." If you can say that, I think it will go a long way. So that's how you guys say that, and I'm gonna write it down here as well, so you guys are able to see. You would just say "hajimemashite, Aaron desu. Yoroshiku, dozo yoroshiku onegai shimasu," is how you would do your first greeting when you first meet them. Now let's move to number 2. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you see your neighbor, Mr. Yamada. So if you remember, good afternoon is konnichiwa. So when you see your neighbor, Mr. Yamada, you could say konnichiwa. You could say konnichiwa, and that would be very appropriate because konnichiwa is fairly polite. It's fairly polite language, and you would be able to say that to your neighbor or to someone that you are not like super super close with. It is still okay and polite to say konnichiwa. Okay, so you come to class. Number 3, you come to class in the morning, and you greet your teacher. Um, come to class in the morning and to greet your teacher and you greet your friends. So it's in the morning time now, and if you wanted to greet your teacher, you could say to your teacher, "Ohayo gozaimasu," which means good morning in a polite way, and it's the proper way to say good morning, especially to like a superior, like a teacher. You'd say "Ohayo gozaimasu," and then you're walking in the classroom, and then you're gonna go sit down with your friends, and your friends, you say what are you gonna say to your friends, and you would just say like "Ohayo." So you don't really need to say "Ohayo gozaimasu" to your friends. It's actually kind of weird to say "Ohayo gozaimasu" to your friends because um, there's no need to be like very formal, I guess, because your relationship is as friends. So that's just something to keep note of. Number 4. So when you're on a crowded train, you stepped on someone's foot. So just like the other one example where the lady accidentally stepped on his foot, what would you say in that situation? You would say "sumimasen." So on a crowded train, you stepped on someone's foot, and you would just say, "Oh, sumimasen," and it just means "excuse me," or "sorry about that." Okay. The next one, number 5, you dropped your book, and then someone picked it up for you. Um, in this situation, you would say "arigatou gozaimasu." Hey guys, sorry, there was a noise interference while I was recording this video, but basically what I wanted to say was you would say "arigatou gozaimasu," which basically means thank you very much. And the reason why you'd say "arigatou gozaimasu" is because you probably do not know this person that picked up the book for you, so it is best for you to be as polite as possible and for you to use "arigatou gozaimasu" rather than using "arigato." If you were to use "arigato," that would be kind of a little bit weird in that situation because you do not know this person. If it was your friend, like if your friend picked up that book for you, then it would be okay for you to say "arigato." Okay, and then moving on to this next one here. It is 8 o'clock at night. You happen to meet your teacher at the convenience store. And so, what would you say? You would say "konbanwa." And the reason you'd say "konbanwa" is because it is at 8 o'clock at night. So it's very formal. It's a polite way of greeting your teacher or greeting anyone. You can say "konbanwa." Moving on to number 7. So you're watching TV with your host family, and it's time to go to sleep. And what are you gonna say? So you would say "oyasumi nasai," or you could say "oyasumi." Oyasumi would also work as well. It's a casual way of saying it. Number 8. You are leaving your home. What would you say? You would say "ittekimasu." And then when you come home, what are you gonna say? You'd say "tadaima," means I'm home. Number 10, you're going to start eating. So this is before when the meal has come to you and someone prepared the meal for you. You'd say "itadakimasu." itadakimasu, which is pretty much giving thanks and giving thanks to the person that cooked the food for you. And then lastly, number 11, when you have just finished eating, what would you do? You would say gochusou-sama, or what we went over earlier, it would be gochusou-sama deshita, which is the more polite way of saying it. Alright guys, that is the practice of everything that we went over, and hopefully you guys will be able to use this in real life situations as well. Alright guys.